Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio. You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
Hello again. This is Jay Shapiro. Thanks for listening. Each week, my program is composed of 3 segments and a short introduction. What I do each week is prepare and record the 3 segments, and then I record the short introduction in which I mention the subjects that I will discuss. This week, things will be somewhat different. After the 3 segments were prepared, a number of things happened that are of such significance that they must be mentioned and commented on, even slightly, without going into details. The first is that Morocco announced that diplomatic missions would be opened in Rabat, the capital of Morocco, and Tel Aviv within 2 weeks. This was announced when Morocco hosted a joint American-Israeli delegation for a series of one-day events to mark the advancement of normalization of ties between the 2 countries. An Israeli-American delegation visited Morocco to sign the first 4 documents that marked the start of normalization procedures. That was good news. The other news is that the Knesset, Israel's parliament, dissolved at midnight on Tuesday, setting March 23rd for no election. This is the 4th time that Israel is going to the polls within 2 years. It is disgraceful that the politicians could not find some way to compromise and avoid spending millions of shekels. This government has been dysfunctional since it was formed 7 months ago. The situation is complicated by the fact it's questionable whether people suffering from coronavirus will be allowed to leave their homes to vote. Israel does not provide the option to vote by mail, which, by the way, proved to be an additional complication in the recent election in the United States. Truth of the matter is, this chaos is inexcusable, and the leaders of all the parties should be ashamed of themselves for enabling this ridiculous situation to occur. I believe it is an embarrassment for the nation, and we'll speak more about it over the weeks to come. Again, thanks for listening. I'll be right back.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
Hello again, everybody. This is Jay Shapiro. I'd like to say a few words now about the new relationships we're having with several Muslim countries, including United Arab Emirates, known as UAE, Morocco, and Bahrain. Since the UAE-Israel peace agreement was signed several months ago, there's been a lot of speculation about the future of these relations. The question is, are we moving toward a cold peace of the same kind we have with Jordan and with Egypt? Or will the relations gradually normalize at the popular and not only the official level? That's the question. The Emirati-Israeli relations are very different from those of the other countries. As I see it, it's not because the UAE has not experienced a direct military conflict with Israel, which it hasn't. But the UAE is an Arab country that's taken a stand and strongly supported the confrontation states that have had wars with Israel. There's no doubt about that. That's history. Besides, the UAE has always defended the rights of the Palestinians. So talking about the difference in the case of the UAE and other countries has nothing to do with the military conflict with Israel. It's about the particular situation of the UAE because of its experience and its model of development and modernization. It has all kinds of development plans and aspirations for global competitiveness that are part of their vision. The promising vision set out specific goals in various documents and various operational programs and to meet their targets with a schedule. So, in order to meet its goals, the UAE wishes to build bridges of cooperation with nations around the world, not only just in the Middle East, in order to benefit from their expertise and to progress in various sectors. Now, Israel has an edge in many industrial and technical sectors and is no exception to the rule. Without working with Israeli industries, experts, and companies, it would be simply hard for the UAE to afford and understand how to get this kind of technology. They need Israel, which has a lot of this technology already built in. Israel has an edge in many industrial and technical sectors. Without working with Israeli companies and experts and Israeli companies, it would simply be hard to afford this technology to start building it from scratch. So the UAE has an apparently ambitious leadership, and it's breaking new ground. So it follows that the normalization of relations between the UAE and Israel has taken on a big momentum since the early days of the signing agreement, which is only a few months ago. Both sides have created formal cooperation frameworks already through business-to-business and sector-to-sector agreements. This was not the case with any of the other Arab countries. Now, it's obvious that the UAE has clear strategic aims in these agreements. It has no interest, apparently, on keeping on a back burner or making a cold peace. There is apparently a mutual desire to put in place mechanisms for cooperation to develop for example, a vaccine against the coronavirus through scientific cooperation aimed at saving human lives. Apart from this, the characteristic attributes of the Emirati society, which is openness and acceptance of others, and it has a culture of coexistence. These are very small countries, so they're anchored in a collective culture in cooperating with other countries. They're all kind of migrant workers, hundreds of thousands even, migrant workers who they're constructing the UAE. The citizens of the UAE deal daily with foreigners from more than 200 different nationalities, both from the East and the West. All of this is to say that the situation in the UAE differs from that of other Arab countries. So apparently there's been lively popular support in the UAE for the official move to set up ties with Israel. As such, the UAE ranks among the most competitive countries according to various development indicators. It's also embarked on believe it or not, a Mars exploration. They successfully launched a probe called the Hope. The UAE's debut in the global space exploration race is an unprecedented step in the Arab world. The UAE is now one of the only 9 countries worldwide with a space program to explore Mars. So the Emiratis strongly back normalization with Israel primarily as a strategic choice for themselves. In order for countries to get along, they have to have mutual interests and also their own interests. Interesting enough, by the way, the average age of the people in the Gulf states is fairly young, and they're highly educated, and it could well be, and I'm sure, by the way, that they share different value systems than their peers in other countries. So creating networks of strategic interest between the UAE and Israel should really inspire other Gulf and Arab countries to do likewise. So it's a good example, hopefully, for the future. Along these lines, there's another mind-blowing fact. Last week, the chief Sephardi rabbi of Israel, Yitzhak Yosef, he left to visit the Jewish community in the United Arab Emirates, that marks the first time a sitting chief rabbi has visited an Arab country. The visit was scheduled to extend last week from the 17th to the 20th of December, and he was planned. I haven't seen the news yet, but the plan was that he would participate in a number of activities, such as the inauguration of a newly certified Jewish nursery school, and in a special ceremony, he would invest Rabbi Levi Duchman, who I think is a Lubavitcher. He's going to be invested as the rabbi of the Emirati Jewish community. The Emirati Jewish community is going to have its own chief rabbi. So it is really a historic visit, and they were very excited to welcome him, according to Rabbi Duchman. And several of the Jewish institutions are now being constructed very accurately and very efficiently, because the UAE is famous for building things very quickly. In his time there, Rabbi Yosef was expected to break ground on a community's mikveh. He'll tour the kosher restaurant, which is in a building called the Burj Khalifa. He'll inspect the production of kosher poultry locally, and dedicate a new community synagogue in Abu Dhabi. All of this was planned, by the way. I'm reading from the plans. Hopefully this was all accomplished. So the Crown Prince, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, is the guy who's behind all this. And they're planning to have a big celebration of an era of cooperation in the region. And they're setting out, according to the rabbi, to ensure that the Jews who come to work or visit in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and across the Emirates will have access to Jewish institutions and services. By the way, there are Jews already going there as tourists, and you're going to have kosher food. Some tens of thousands of Israelis have already reported travel to the UAE just weeks after commercial flights were established between Israel and the UAE. And these flights, by the way, fly over Saudi Arabia. So a wave of Israelis has been visiting there. And so that's really, really something. Who would have believed this a year ago? Or 6 months ago? Of course, all the preliminary work was done under the table. We didn't know about it, but here it is, and it's really in this year of a pandemic, but everybody's closed in and things are kind of sad. To have news like this is really something nice, and hopefully, it will be the beginning of more. For example, Morocco has come on board. And I'll say a few more words about that after the break. There's no time now. I spend most of the time talking about the UAE, which is the big one. And I think the Morocco is going to be the next really big one. So, by the way, I myself, I visited Morocco last year. With my wife, we were traveling on American passports. But today, I think, or shortly, you'll be able to go there on an Israeli passport. So things are looking up despite the pandemic. Things in the Jewish world hopefully are looking up, and I hope that they'll be permanent and not just temporary. I'll be back after the break.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro. I mentioned in the previous segment of the program about our relationships now with the United Arab Emirates. Now I want to touch upon something else along the same lines, which is also mind-boggling. Last week, Morocco's ambassador to the United Nations, named Omar Hilal, pledged to build a bridge of peace with Israel. He said this, believe it or not, as he lit the 8th candle of Hanukkah with his Israeli counterpart, Gilad Iran, at a special ceremony in New York last Thursday. The Moroccan ambassador joined the Israeli mission celebration in New York just 1 week after the announcement that Morocco had become the 4th Muslim nation to agree to a normalization deal with Israel under the rubric of the Abraham Accords, which were brokered by the United States. They celebrated the holiday as a new geopolitical reality for Israel as we head into 2021. In his brief speech, the Moroccan ambassador underscored his country's tie to the Jewish people. Morocco is very proud of its long history of cooperation with the Jewish people. I'm quoting him. He recalled that during the Holocaust, Morocco shielded its Jews from the Nazis and blocked their deportation to concentration camps. He said that Europeans sent their Jewish citizens to concentration camps, but the former Moroccan king Mohammed V told the Vichy authorities that in his country they did not have a Jewish or Muslim citizen. They had only Moroccan citizens, and he will not take anyone. So Morocco is quite proud. There's such a large community of almost 1 million Jews of Moroccan descent living in Israel. Then, at the same ceremony, the ambassador for the United Arab Emirates said that the peace accords between the UAE and Israel was a highlight in an otherwise difficult year. And he said, we've seen other countries following suit. We can only hope these agreements usher in a new area of shared vision for peace and prosperity. And Hanukkah, this is the UAE ambassador speaking. She said Hanukkah is a reminder that miracles do happen. There was also the Bahraini ambassador was there, and he commented that the event comes at a very special time. The peace accord between Bahrain and Israel gives us an opportunity to enhance stability, prosperity, and peace in this region. And as we enter this season of celebration, I'd like to wish all the Jewish people in Bahrain, Israel, and around the world a very happy and safe Hanukkah. So that's something that's mind blowing when you think about who would have dreamed it a year ago that the diplomats from these two Arab countries would be celebrating Hanukkah together with the Israeli ambassador at the UN. The American ambassador, of course, was also there, and it really was something really mind-boggling. Now, there was also an ambassador from Bhutan. That's Bhutan, which I think most people don't know where to find on the map. And I want to say something about that. It has a king, apparently. It has a royal government. The ambassador from Bhutan said, and I quote, "The royal government looks forward to strengthening the bonds of friendship between Bhutan and Israel." So let me say a few words about what that's all about. It's another that's really something that's under the radar. Now, what and where is Bhutan? When I heard that Israel made ties with Bhutan, I had to pull out a map, try to find out where it was. The Kingdom of Bhutan is a Himalayan mountain nation. It's one of the most isolated in the world. It's not as isolated, for example, as North Korea, but it has nevertheless done more so than most to resist globalization. Israel's previous lack of ties with Bhutan was not linked to the Arab-Israel conflict at all, but it was due to Bhutan's strict isolationist policies. The kingdom has a population of little more than 770,000 citizens and only began allowing tourists in 1970. And TV and internet were not permitted until 1999. It's a hermit kingdom by definition, and it has full diplomatic ties with only 53 other nations around the world. So this new agreement with Israel comes after several years of secret communication. Now, the move to establish relations with Bhutan came just a few days after Israel and Morocco normalized ties, and a deal that was brokered by the Americans after the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan. Now, where is Bhutan? It's landlocked between India and China. It has historically been closer to India. It's considered a protected state, not a protectorate per se. It's dependent on India for issues such as technology, defense, and economics. India has good ties with Israel, and now Bhutan has. In contrast, the Bhutan-Chinese border has been closed since the 1959 invasion of Tibet, and their tensions with China, they remain as a border dispute. Of course, Bhutan has no border disputes with Israel. So what's happened is, just a couple more words, recently revenues from tourism have helped boost life expectancy, reduce infant mortality, and increase the standard of living. I don't know what the standard of living is like in Bhutan. The Bhutanese government is pretty reluctant to open up for foreigners. Why? Because it has an unspoiled environment, it has culture, and it, incidentally, to the best of my knowledge, it's the only country in the world where cigarettes and plastic bags are illegal. It's the only tobacco-free country in the world. Also, animal slaughter is illegal because of Buddhism being the state religion, although, of course, meat is imported from India. And interestingly enough, Bhutan produces more oxygen than it consumes. according to the encyclopedia. And I'm not. That's the kind of question that come up in a quiz show. So the Israel's new ties with this isolated kingdom is really something, and it's something we're very proud of. I don't know how long the negotiations took place, but I'm pretty sure the Israelis are going to be rushed as soon as they can. They're going to be rushing to Bhutan to do some mountain climbing, and I don't know what the influx of Israelis are going to the Bhutanese, how much they're going to like that kind of thing. But this is a new agreement. By the way, until this agreement was signed, Bhutan was one of the few non-Arab, non-Muslim nations that didn't recognize Israel. The others are North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela. And Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea don't recognize Israel, probably because socialism and they're part of the Soviet Union's anti-Israel stance, even though the Cold War is long over. So it's very interesting. We have a new friend in the Far East. I just say one final point on that. Israel's new ties with this relatively isolated kingdom reflects the fact that there really is a new Middle East. And it's one where Israel's role in the world at large is bigger and more significant than it's ever been in its 72-year history. So it's unbelievable when you think back in 1948, what our situation was, what the situation of the Jews was in 1945, and now Israel has become really a first-rate power. There's no two ways about it. I want to close out the last minute of this segment with something about the relationship with the UAE. The Senate voted last week allowing the president to proceed with a $23 billion arms package to the United Arab Emirates. So it firmly establishes new lines in the Middle East, making clear who America's best allies in the region are, and creating conditions for peace not seen since the Camp David Accords back in 1968. So through this investment, the UAE ties its security and future to partnering with the U.S. Its military now depends on U.S. equipment and know-how. Its foreign goals in the region are the same as the Americans. This month, since September, there have been tangible and meaningful advances in this region where progress is usually measured over decades. In the short time since September 15th, the UAE and Israel have announced more areas of dialogue and cooperation, including bilateral trade, direct airline flights, and cooperation on health, technology, and other areas. It's an altogether different world now than it was even on September 14th. I'll be back after the break.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
You're listening to The Jay Shapiro Show.
You're back with Jay Shapiro. Now that the American election is behind us, and I've had an opportunity to speak to my relatives in the United States, I want to draw some conclusion about American Jews and the election. President Trump is exceptionally unpopular, particularly among secular American Jews, and of course among some religious. Despite his groundbreaking approach to Middle East peace and active efforts on Israel's behalf. The reason is that many American Jews have simply stopped caring about both Israel and Judaism. And if Jews stop caring about themselves, nobody else will. The only ones who I found were really supportive of Trump were the very right-wing Orthodox. Somewhere between 70 and 75% American Jews voted for Joe Biden, despite the President Donald Trump's accomplishments on Israel's behalf. Now, this isn't surprising, as all the major polls taken of American Jews show that they put Israel at the bottom of their list of political concerns. According to a 2020 study by the Ruderman Foundation, only 4% of American Jewish voters identify Israel as their first or second most important election issue. 43% prioritize health care, 28% prioritize the problem of gun violence, and 21% prioritize Social Security and medical care. Now, American Jews' tilt toward the Democrats in 2020 is consistent with their voting history. U.S. Jews have been ardent supporters of the Democratic Party ever since the early 20th century, no matter who was leading it or who was representing the Republican Party. For most American Jews, the United States is essentially a one-party system, which is kind of ironic as many of their parents and grandparents came to the U.S. to escape the authoritarian or totalitarian regimes of Europe. Generally speaking, the Democratic Party has been friendly over the years toward Jewish causes, at least in terms of its public statements. But President Trump was quite different. Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. His administration stopped considering Israel neighborhoods in what's called the West Bank as illegal. He facilitated the Abraham Accords, which led to the public opening of diplomatic relations between Israel and the Gulf states of UAE and Bahrain, and now also Sudan. He issued an executive order against anti-Semitism, and arguably no American president other than Harry Truman, who recognized Israel at its very outset, or Richard Nixon, who supplied the critical airlift during the Yom Kippur War, no other president has done more for the Jews and the Jewish state than Trump. Now, many of these accomplishments were promised on the campaign trail for decades by other U.S. presidential candidates. None was fulfilled until Donald Trump took office. Yet his apparent attraction for the Jews is not reciprocated by American Jews. So the real question is, why not? Trump is not an easy person to like. He's a complicated man. Some of his personality traits are not what many would desire in a personal friend. Most people recognize that electing a president is different than befriending someone. But many American Jews, and perhaps many people in general, want leaders for whom they can feel affection personally and possess a character that they respect. Dubious character is a valid reason not to vote for a candidate, but it's not sufficient to explain the exceptionally low level of Trump's popularity among American Jews. Most American Jews are superficially religious, fiscally liberal, and they value education over knowledge. This population can be subdivided into two categories. A minority that's willing to grant that Trump achieved major accomplishments for Jews in Israel, and a majority that is actively hostile toward Israel and places no value on these accomplishments. They are either hostile for various reasons, but I think the majority is not hostile. I take that back. I think the majority is indifferent. While those who are willing to grant Trump that Trump achieved accomplishment, they're inclined to minimize the significance of Trump's achievements on behalf of Jews in Israel, although he agreed that he put some kind of peace process on a positive trajectory. That's not enough to overcome their personal revulsion toward Trump as a person, so they would never vote for him no matter what he did. The larger group is those who are indifferent to things Jewish. They display a trend unprecedented among American Jews since the end of World War II. They admit they don't care about Israel. They don't think about Israel. They couldn't care less about what President Trump has done or not done for Israel. These issues are irrelevant to them, including the issue of anti-Semitism, which, as far as they're concerned, comes under the general rubric of anti-racism and equality. They're simply not interested. By the way, I got the impression that this group believes that anyone who benefited from Trump's presidency is somehow stained as an enemy of the people. Everything touched by President Trump bears the mark of Cain. They simply don't like anything that Trump did, and they're indifferent to Israel. By the way, this development has an echo in a more distant past. The German Jews who were the first to settle in the U.S. in the 19th century wanted to separate themselves from the rest of Jewry. They were especially didn't care about the religious, and they didn't care about the Zionists. The huge influx of Eastern European Jewry at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, put a temporary halt to that tendency, but it didn't stop it completely. So why did President Trump go to the trouble of achieving his result for Israel in the first place? I think there are two reasons. One is the support of the Christians who support Israel. I think the president knew that he knows the American Jewish community pretty well, and he has to have known he couldn't expect any gratitude from the secular Jewish majority. He hasn't benefited one iota from his efforts on Israel's behalf, all of which, by the way, I think were politically risky. As I said, I think the major thing was the support of the Christians who support Israel. He wanted their support, and indeed, they voted for him big time, particularly if you look at the vote in the states in the center of the United States, not on the East Coast and not on the West Coast. That's where most, if not all, the fundamentalist Christians live, and that's where he got a lot of support. And of course, he might have done these things because they were right, which would be the behavior of a true friend, but I don't know if I can put Trump in that category. Most American Jews refuse to credit him for his accomplishments because most Americans simply don't care about Israel or their religion, as I see it. So the truth of the matter is that if Jews stop caring for themselves, nobody else will. So that's an interesting topic unto itself. I'm going to finish the program on a much lighter and interesting subject. There is a new license plate in Florida. Florida, by the way, voted Republican. It features an orange blossom and an orange with a blue Star of David in between them against a background of desert sand and sea. Above the words, Florida stands with Israel. It will be a special license plate. It will go into production shortly. A portion of the revenue generated by the sales of this new specialty license will benefit Hatzalah of Miami-Dade, a nonprofit that deploys community-based, state-certified volunteer paramedics to slash response times and increase the survival rate of emergencies in Hawaii. In Florida, I'm sorry. The bill was signed by the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. It was supported by a number of majority and minority leaders, including a large number of non-Jews. And the orange blossom represents both Israel and Florida. It has a tropical leaf. It's quite beautiful, and the symbol interacts with the two waves on top and bottom, representing Israeli's flag. So it's something very nice, something new. Until next time, then, Jay Shapiro signing off. Let's hope we all have a good week.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.